Lightning like Steve McQueen. I'm in the fast lane when the light turns green. And I built tough, I ain't nothing but grit. Cause I made rugged blood, sweat, and spit. Yeah, like a horse I fly. Better push yourself in for a bumpy ride. I like to play hard, but I work harder. And I weather the storm cause I'm built stronger.
What is up, ladies and gentlemen? We are back. We are live. It is the Freight Coach Morning Show, the top morning show in transportation, coming to you guys every single weekday, 8:30 a.m. Pacific, 10:30 Central, to break down some industry headlines. And most importantly, provide some actual insight into what you can do with all of this information. If this is your first time tuning in, welcome. This is the real side of freight, ladies and gentlemen. And what do I mean by that when I say that? I mean that I only speak to transportation professionals on this show, as well as my twice a week long form podcast, because I want to put the right information out there from the people who have done what you're looking to do or who are currently doing what you're trying to achieve. So you can take that information, apply it, utilize it, and see a meaningful difference in your business and your life. It's one of the many, many reasons why I probably fly this American flag behind me every single day. A, we're the greatest nation on earth, but B, I'm living my American dream, and I want to help each and every one of you live yours as well. All right, we got a special guest for you guys here today. I'm going to bring him up in 1 second. Thomas, Weird and Happy Trucking Day. He says 10-4. Let's truck it up. Tracy St. Clair over on YouTube. Good morning to you. We're going to talk about some pretty cool stuff today. This guy's done a lot of work. He's been on the show before. And without further ado, my non-chief legal expert, Matthew Leffler, who comes on and talks about all this shit. So, Matt, what's up, buddy? How are you?
I am living La Vida Loca, as the children insist that I say. It's a great day to be here, Chris. How are you?
I'm doing well, man. You know, making it happen one truck at a time. That's my company slogan. One truck at a time. And that's what we're going to do, you know, and we're going to continue to show up. We're going to continue to make things happen. And, you know, I saw this article the other day and I'm like, man, I got to talk to Matt Leffler about this one, because I won't go into details, but if you Google my name, if you really want to dive in deep and find a former employer of mine and Google my name, you're going to find something similar out there to what we're going to talk about today with this case that's out there, because it's interesting, man. It's really interesting to deal with this. So like, what does all of this mean in like plain English?
This is the case of TQL and the classification of workers as exempt versus non-exempt. And exemption has to do with whether you pay overtime or you don't pay overtime. And this case started in 2010, 13 years ago. It didn't make it to trial until 2022. And over a 13-day trial, it was argued that TQL had this group of this special name. They call them the Logistics Account Executive Trainee, or the LAET. This is essentially a new freight broker, somebody who's never done the business. They're paid a straight salary and they don't get commission. And then there's another group of people in this case, and they call them the Junior Logistics Account Executive, the LAE. And this LAE is when someone moves away from being a trainee. Now they're a broker, but they're still getting paid straight salary. They're not getting a commission yet. And the question is, are these people subject to overtime rules? And what we learned in this case was these people were expected to work 60 hours a week, Saturdays as well. And they didn't get any overtime. And over, this 13 years of litigation, this judgment, this opinion, this 50-page, beautiful document, comes out September 26, 2023. And the answer is they owe some overtime, and they owe a lot of overtime.
It's going to be interesting. Cole Mickey, like, what's going on, man? Good morning. Bill McIntyre, good morning. Sydney Thiessen, good morning to you. Jason Vikas, what is up? Thomas says, my God.
I love Thomas. Think freight. I'm trying to think freight every day. I'm trying to think freight.
Louis Montano, good morning. And Sean Alvey says, that's nuts and most likely not. Dude, this is interesting, right? Because it's like, from my perspective, this is the, I was always under the impression that if you were a salary, you weren't entitled to any overtime compensation.
Common misconception. It all depends on what you actually do. So if you're not doing things that are essentially professional services like a lawyer or a doctor or an accountant or a dentist, you're not doing administrative things like with your company as like an HR person or a marketing person, and you're not like in a managerial or a C-level role, you are required to pay people overtime. Now, it might be easy to say, hey, we're going to give you salary, consistent 40 hours, whatever. But if you're in that role that is, not exempt, you're going to have to pay them overtime. I mean, this is the way this works. Now, employers make the decision. Are you exempt or you non-exempt? And they have some guidance of what they need to do. But if you misclassify, oh my golly, is the liability substantial. So this case, it only affects TQL employees that are these two, like the LAET and the junior, in the state of Ohio. It's only Ohio. And the class itself goes back from September of 2008 through April of 2016. So it's a very small class of people that are now entitled to at least 2 years of overtime if they worked more than 40 hours. And they all worked more than 40 hours. And that's time and a half. This is bonkers. And it gets so crazy as we go through this thing.
Yeah.
Your mind will blow. It's ridiculous.
So how many employees, because like if this is a class action lawsuit, right? So there's multiple, probably hundreds of people who are on this. And this had to have been a lawyer who took this on pro bono, right? Because like this is a very long, or somebody who was affected by this had very deep pockets to really get this going.
Yeah, this is about plaintiffs' employment attorneys. I will tell you this: I was a plaintiff's employment attorney in a past life. I know how these people operate. What we do is we take these cases usually on a contingent fee basis. So that is to say, I get nothing unless I win, and if I win, I get something. And usually that something is 30%, 33%, some percentage of the total winnings. And we as lawyers, we can be patient. Now, TQL and their lawyers, they're also very, very patient. But when you have employment litigators that know the law, know the way this stuff works, they can wait out the 12, 13 years they have to get to this moment. So I do not think at all this was pro bono. I think what happened here was a lawyer said, I see what happened, because C.H. Robinson got in trouble for the same thing a couple decades ago. Like they got the same problem. Our industry doesn't communicate that very well. And nobody wants to be seen as the guy who sues his former employer or the gal who's litigious. But in class action, it's about getting certification. It's about saying, hey, you all are very similarly situated. Your experiences are all very similar. We're going to bundle you all together. We have one person who's named, and our named plaintiff is Robert Hendricks. Robert Hendricks is a hero for being the guy who is the poster child for this litigation. 13 years going. But yeah, this is very, very, very expensive litigation.
No, I mean, damn, dude, it's like, here we are, like you said, 13 years later. And this is like, and I want to be like very, very clear. I'm impartial to this. I saw that this article came up and I'm like, man, there's a lot of people out there that are probably in a similar boat right now. And I am not sitting here saying you're entitled to compensation, go sue your former employer or anything like that. I just want people to be aware of how they're being classified. And I also want I want employers out there to be aware of how they're classifying their employees, because they might not even know that they're doing it wrong.
Let me build off of that. First of all, if you have been at one of these types of trainees within a freight brokerage company and you are working salary, but you're working over 60 hours a week and you're really just, all you're doing is cold calling. All you're doing is track and trace. Where's the trucking company? Where's the carrier? Building out the loads in your database. You are probably non-exempt. You probably are an hourly employee and you just don't know it. But that misinformation, that wrong decision, it talks about in this case. So what we first litigated in this case, when you go through the notes, is, are they exempt or non-exempt? The answer is, under a federal law, they are non-exempt. These are people that are hourly. The question then becomes, why? Why were they made why are they made exempt? And in this case, Ken Oakes, the CEO or whatever of TQL, is deposed. He is put on the stand and said, tell us the truth. How did you make this decision? And what he says is buried in this complaint. He says, I took guidance from the TIA, the Transportation Intermediary Association.
Oh, wow.
They were relying on the TIA. Now, Ken Oakes didn't go to his in-house lawyers and say, hey, are we violating the law maybe? Or he didn't go to outside counsel and say, hey, are we doing the right thing? He went to the TIA. So everyone who's going to TIA and saying, hey, I don't know how to classify somebody, and they're saying you should classify them as exempt, you are facing some enormous risk. Not for TIA, they're exempt. I mean, they're not going to be sued. They're just an advocacy group. But anyone who listened to TIA, you are going to have you're going to have an issue because of the way that Ken Oakes went about verifying whether or not you're exempt or non-exempt. It caused them to be found liable for what we call liquidated damages. Mm-hmm. So imagine yourself as an employer. You now have to pay back wages, overtime, all withholdings for people for the last 2 years who have a specific role. That number is doubled. That doubling is the liquidated damages, the exact amount you're found to be at fault on compensatory side, like what you were supposed to pay. You have to pay that now. That's the first thing. But you also double it for liquidated damages because they didn't do a good faith investigation as to what someone should be classified. I have had dozens of freight brokers reach out to me in the last 24 hours and say, what does this actually mean? Oh, it's coming for every state. If you are a TQL employee or your TQL office that has brick and mortar that does this same program, you're going to be found liable in federal court. Like, I don't see this going away. Yes, the satellite offices, absolutely. If I was a plaintiff's attorney in this space, I would be salivating because the other thing you get if you win is your attorney's fees. Yeah. So that lawyer who's been litigating this case since 2010, all those legal bills, TQL gets to pay for those. Isn't that nice? Isn't that lovely? And this will happen for every freight brokerage that does this same practice. Now, the one thing that TQL was successful with in this lawsuit was they were able to show they didn't willingly, knowingly violate the law. They pled ignorance. They said, well, we went to the TIA and they said it was okay. If they would have lost on that aspect of intentionality, that limitations of the statute would be 3 years look back. So not just 2 years of overtime, 3 years of overtime. And that is a federal statute that is in every single state in the country. This is a watershed moment. We have taken advantage of young people who don't understand the world, don't understand the rules, just like you, Chris. Oh, I thought salary is exempt. No, dude, they tricked you. They tricked you. There are posters in your lunchroom that say, here's what you do. No one reads those. No one reads those.
True.
They will read this, Chris. They will read this. It'll be amazing.
So, you know, my head, as a business owner myself, my head goes to, what if I didn't knowingly partake in this way? Like, it was a mistake.
Yeah.
Because, you know, maybe we were compensating them on a salary plus commission, and stuff like that. And it wasn't just a straight salary. We're expecting you to work 60 hours or you're fired. Is there any, and again, like this isn't legal advice, you guys. This is just a conversation that's being had. And God, this is why I wanted to talk about this, because I have a feeling, and I'm not throwing guilt or shade at any organization out there, but I have a feeling that there's probably a lot more organizations out there, not just in transportation, that might be inadvertently guilty of this practice and aren't even aware of it.
Yeah. So this is a good example. So there are types of exemptions from the Federal Labor Standards Act. There are exemptions you can have. So like I said, if you're a C-level person or a manager, you're going to be exempted. If you're doing administrative stuff within your company, so you're doing marketing, you're doing admin, you're doing HR, you're doing whatever those things are, you're going to be exempted, or at least you can be exempted. If you're a professional, like lawyers, you can be exempted. If you're doing someone's commission, you're probably going to be fine. Like if you're doing commission, you're probably not going to have to worry about misclassification. Now, I encourage anyone who's listening going, I don't know the answer. Call a lawyer. Like that's what we're paid money to do. And you will thank yourself. Yes, it might cost you $500 or $1,000. That's a lot of money. But the liability is substantial. But to your first question, Chris, if you didn't know, can you still be responsible? Absolutely. Ignorance is not an excuse for being compliant with federal statute.
I know. I'm
And
laughing
we
I'm
will
laughing
break
at-
you over the wheel if you claim that. That's just, but the statute of limitations will only be 2 years, not 3. If you knowingly violated the law, that's 3 years. And the thing to note for everyone watching and listening at home, there is not an insurance policy that exists that covers wage and hour theft. So this is out of you're not going to call your insurance company and say, hey, I just got sued. They're going to say, that sucks for you. That's not our problem. It is unable to buy that type of insurance. And so that is out of your operating capital. That is out of your assets that you might have to lien or sell to access the capital to pay off these legal fees. And here's the thing that we conclude with at the very end of this order. Corporate officers who are involved with this litigation are personally, individually, jointly, and severally. These are all legal terms. You are on the hook for the total amount. So whatever happens in this TQL lawsuit, Ken Oaks is 100% responsible for the entire verdict. Now, TQL will pay for it, but if TQL or another brokerage company can't pay the verdict, you, in your individual capacity, your home, your car, your savings, that's for me to take from you. You are responsible for all of it.
Probably depending on how your business is structured out and everything. Like, I'm sure that people get crafty. Once you hit certain levels of wealth, you don't personally own shit. I'm just going to throw that out there.
You can have directors and officers insurance, which may cover the verdict. That there's a path there, but no, like when I say personally responsible, like our government, our federal government has made a choice, and we voted for the choice. It's a statute on the books. They say, look, if you're stealing wages from employees, that is more important to us than your ability to avoid liability with the interesting corporate structure. Corporate officers are personally responsible for violations of the Federal Labor Standards Act. And that is big, big, big.
No, definitely, man. And, again, as you guys can tell, Matt's a lawyer through and through. He's very argumentative of his stance here. And that's why I have him on the show to talk about stuff like this, right? Because it is like, you got to think this stuff through, right? Like, it's not always as simple as it seems, right? But this is also, if you're going to fight for this stuff, if you're going to start a company, like, these are things that you need to think about, right? You need to think about this stuff long term. It's not always as simple and clear cut as people think, because my honest opinion on this entire situation is we got to make sure that people are very much aware of what they're getting themselves into. And then also, if you're in the interview phase with some of these companies, I would want to know some of this stuff, right? Like how does because I think a lot of people walk into a lot of situations very blindly, Matt.
Yeah.
They think that, I just need a job. And I think that it's only a matter of time before there's just some crafty verbiage in some of these employment contracts that are out there that are, because like, you're a lawyer, Matt. Some of these businesses are multi-billion-dollar.
I got all the paperwork on the side of the wall. Absolutely.
There will be changes to their verbiage in their employment contracts that protect them from this moving forward. Like, there will be some change. I'm not saying it's going to be all the way up, but like there's going to be some changes. Companies are going to protect themselves.
The way to look at this is that, and this is not to throw shade on freight brokering necessarily, or at least being junior levels in this stuff. But when your primary job as a freight broker is prospecting and you're paid straight salary, you are going to be considered non-exempt. I mean, you're going to have to pay them overtime. And the thing that we look at is, like, look at a retail company. If you're working at the cash register, no one's going to say, oh no, this person's actually, they're exempt. They're doing something that's really important for our business. We can't have them paid hourly. They're going to lose that thing. What happens with our industry is it's very insular, very, very small. And the interest groups that help advise the big organizations may not have the interest of the individual employees at heart and may not actually understand the law particularly well. I mean, the idea that, like, Ken Oaks, under the penalty of perjury, testified that the reasoning he made the decision was because of TIA means that probably other freight brokers are listening to the same advice. And you can think about ways to circumvent the liability in this case. I would say, and I'm a lawyer, maybe there's more creative lawyers out there than me. I don't think you can. I don't think it's possible. One of the things that TQ ends up doing in 2015, which we see in this complaint, is they switched a model. At one point, if you were a junior level sales executive, you would have to pull the plug and say, I want to go straight commission. I'm done with being a salary guy or gal. And that was a voluntary decision. TQL no longer makes it voluntary. The moment that they can find out that your commission exceeds your salary, they pull the plug for you. You are making commission. And I believe, and I think we're going to find this over time, and I have to look through the documents. I think that happened because of this lawsuit. I think they realized that our liability of someone being salaried when they shouldn't be is going to be so substantial. We need to make sure they're not on the salary anymore.
Yeah.
This is crazy, man. I mean, you get these kids signing non-competition agreements. They don't understand that thing. And we have employers that don't understand the federal labor laws, which again, like you can't do that. You just can't do that.
No, man. And it's like, from my perspective, because like, obviously we're going to be hiring, we're looking to build our organization up because, you know, again, we're going to be the #1 transportation company in North American history. But classifying employees properly that's like what our attorney was like. No. Oh, wait, there's more. I forget the game show that was, but you know, because we're like, hey, we were looking at having a a commission only sales rep and everything. And, you know, depending on the labor laws in the state that you're associated with, you guys, like I love Matt, but I'm not always the biggest fan of attorneys out there because, you know, it's $500 just to hit send on the email. But
I charge a 0.1 for reviewing emails typically. This is
but you know, my thing is you need to have these conversations. If you're an employer out there, you need to make sure you're classifying your people right. And on top of that, you're compensating them properly in accordance to the law, because otherwise, I mean, how many people out there are like, oh, we only have 1099 commission only sales reps or whatever that looks like. And then they're like holding them to KPIs and everything else. And they're technically independent contractors. There's a lot of stuff that we went through. You got to be very, very, very clear on how you classify an employee if you're going to go the non-traditional route and not have a W-2.
Yeah, you're 100% right. I mean, the reality is you can try to eliminate your liability by making people 1099s, but if you control them in a way that is a little bit too strong, you can be sued for misclassifying them. Maybe they're actually W-2. Now you have all this back payments, back wages, workers' compensation you have to deal with because it's substantial. If you're in this position and you're like, I have a small freight brokerage, I have a small team of people that are W-2s, what should I do? One, obviously consult an attorney in your market, but a simple rule is pay the minimum wage at a minimum. If they work over the time, they work over than 40 hours, you should probably think about paying them overtime. These things aren't going to be, no one's going to come knocking on your door from the government. This is going to come probably through plaintiffs and attorneys who find out that you're doing something that they know they can beat you on. And if you're a big freight brokerage, and you are not quaking in your shoes because of this case, you are not paying attention. This case, I guarantee you, will be the biggest thing in our industry in a decade. If the entire brokerage industry is dependent upon classifying folks as exempt, working them for 60 hours, and then throwing them away when you're done with them, you are going to have a lot of liability coming your way. And it's not, again, you can't buy insurance for it. If I was attorney suing you as a broker, I would find out all your assets, all your bank accounts. I'd freeze all those things. I'd take your assets. I'd lien your property. If you were personally responsible, like you are as a corporate officer, I'd lien your car. I'd lien your house. I'd liquidate everything you have. And you'd come to me and say, I'm going to go bankrupt. And I'm saying, yes, that's exactly what's going to happen. This is bet the farm litigation. TQL in that lawsuit had almost 600 separate filings. This thing's been going on for 13 years. They fought as hard as they could and they lost in their home state, and they will lose probably everywhere else they go. And TIA, oh my goodness, if this comes out to be the case, I want to see some heads roll, because that is absurd that you put your members at that level of liability. It's bonkers. It's bonkers. It's fascinating stuff, man.
It really is, Matt. It really is, because, you know, again, I'm not sitting up here. I'm not even going to, you know, I see the comments that are coming through and everything else. I understand companies have reputations out there, but I'm not here to talk about any of that stuff. I'm here to talk about how businesses can protect themselves, or maybe right the ship if they are whether they're willingly or unwillingly doing this or not is irrelevant to what we're here to talk about today. We're here to talk about the facts, to educate people.
I will say the willingly part is worth understanding, because if they could not show that TQL willingly violated the law. You had to show intentionality. They knew there was questions around the categorization. They relied on their partners at TIA, and that was not enough to show a willingness that they intentionally did this. After this case, I think intentionality is a lot easier to prove, because now you're on notice. And the difference between intentionality and not intentionality is an additional 1 year of the statute of limitations on the Federal Labor Standards Act. So it just means you get to pay more money. It's crazy. It
really is, man. But again, like this is the stuff that people need to be aware of, right? Like this, because I know Matt and I talk a lot offline about, non-competes and like just the legal side of things, because it's such a like how more people don't think about what they're doing and like the legality behind it is like just mind-boggling to me, right? Like that's as a business owner, that's my biggest thing. Like my biggest fear is going to jail. A, because I'm way too pretty to be walking around in that place. But B, I don't want to look back at my company one day and be like, damn, how did I miss that? Right? Like this is the importance. Again, like I'm a small business, right? I spend thousands of dollars a year with my attorneys to make sure things are done right, that make sure I understand with a fine-tooth comb what I am going through and what this entails. Because as soon as your name is on a contract, as soon as you sign that document, you're liable. Whether you think it's fair or not, you're liable. And I think that people need to very much be aware of what they're getting themselves into. And if you're an employer, most importantly, if you own that company or you're the C-suite or whatever, you need to look at this stuff with a fine-tooth comb, because you can't just throw your hands up in the air and be like, oh, we weren't aware. You need to be aware of all of this stuff. You need to, because otherwise, again, I'm not here to talk or throw shade on any organization out there, but it speaks volumes on where this judgment was solidified in, because it is in their home court. It is, and that's a lot. That's a big.
I want to read this. I know we're getting close on time. I want to read this section. It goes, and this is about Ken Oaks being deposed and talking about TIA. Because I made a post on Reddit, and a lot of people were like, "Did TIA really do that? Like, how can you prove that?" But it's what I want to read this. It goes, bottom of page 50. The initial decision on how to classify LAETs and junior LAEs was made by Oaks. That's when he deposed. Oaks made his decision based on guidance from the Transportation Intermediaries Association, a trade organization for freight brokers, and conversations he had with others in the industry during a TIA convention. However, good faith cannot be established merely by conforming with industry standards. That is the thing that I want everybody to remember. If you are paying money to the TIA and you're following that guidance, I would be on the call with your representative today, because that is a massive disservice. If they have hold themselves out as the best people in the business to help you run a brokerage company, and they are putting one of the biggest players that has ever existed in such a legal, difficult position, that is unacceptable. You cannot rely on industry organizations to protect your business. You must, as Chris mentioned, do it yourself. Hire a lawyer, pay the fine, figure out what you need to do. Because at the end of the day, I and my brother in the law business, or my sisters in the law business, we don't care how hard you work.
Yeah.
We only care if you violated the law. And if you did, we'll find out. And if you did violate it and we find out, we're going to get a verdict against you. If we get a verdict, you're in trouble.
I view that statement. I like, that's like the boy who cried wolf, right? Like, oh, well, I was told.
I was following orders. I don't know. Dude, I'm a broker. I don't know how to do this thing. I thought they were the smart ones.
That's my perception of that. Cause at the end of the day, man, you're the sole equity owner of that company. That's on you. You can't sit there and claim anything.
And I know we're close. I want to end with this last thing under individual liability I mentioned before. This is, again, bottom of page 52. Under the FLSA, an employer is defined as any person, quote, acting in directly or indirectly in the interest of the employer in relation to an employee, end quote. The Sixth Circuit has explained that, quote, the overwhelming weight of authority is that a corporate officer with operational control of a corporation's covered enterprise is an employer along with the corporation, jointly and severally liable under the FLSA for unpaid wages. As its CEO, defendants do not dispute that Kenneth Oaks is individually liable to the extent TQL is found liable. You are personally at risk if you are not following the labor standards. And if you don't understand that, go on Google and say, what does joint and several liability mean? It means everything is owed by you. If your company goes bankrupt, I am coming for you and I will take everything you have. And it's not going to be me. I don't do that anymore. But there are people who are a lot like me and you don't want to deal with us in the courtroom. We are all monsters, but we're paid monsters. And that's why we do what we do.
Kyle Provost said this show should just be me and you every single day.
Oh, it'd be so much fun. It'd be so much fun. People are like this lawyer screaming in the darkness.
Yeah, but it's the fact of the matter is, Matt, no matter how you try and spin any of this stuff, the reason why we put this show out every single day, you guys, is to educate others on because you only know what you know, and you can't claim ignorance always, right? Like you need to take that personal responsibility here. And I think I think that this is going to be the tipping point of probably a lot more. There might be some gag orders on some other high profile cases that are going on right now that aren't public until the final decision's made. But I think that a lot of people out there, you got to look at it like this. You really need to protect your organization and you need to become educated on this. If you own a company, you have a couple hundred employees, talk with your attorneys right now and find out. And because again, this isn't legal advice. None of this is anything other. This is just
don't take legal advice from a podcast.
This is a couple of dudes who just believe in the First Amendment, and we're gonna talk freely.
Though I have liability insurance for any malpractice, which I'm not committing because I'm not giving legal advice.
Yeah, you might be able to write that ship right now and be like, "Hey guys, we're changing compensation. You're now going to get some bonus," and it might be cheaper that way. Again, not legal advice or anything like that, but you could probably.
And that's a really good point. Like if you're going to start, if you're a company, you're thinking, I know we could talk for a little bit longer, right, Chris? This is your show.
Do whatever I want.
If you are in this position and you are now saying, I don't know what to do, because here's the thing people think. I'll make adjustments to be compliant now. What happens before? Am I going to get sued now? And now the people are on notice. That's a risk you have to take. You're going to have to take that risk. I would strongly advise finding counsel to make sure you do this transition correctly, because you could expose yourself. You're already exposed to liability. You don't know it, but you already are exposed to liability. Changing it, making it fixed, that subsequent remediation that you do to fix the problem is not evidence you committed broke the law, but you need to make changes. And I'll say this also to Chris, I would not have known about this case, but for you. So you sent me, you want to talk about this? Like, I have no idea. There were no articles online that I could find behind a paywall. So I had to go find the documents. And once I read this and I understood what the stakes are, this will change the industry in unique and profound ways we do not understand yet. Maybe it means that the entire business model of trainees that are working past 40 hours goes away. And that is a good outcome. That is a very good outcome. When you can work and get commission, go do as much hours as you want. But if you're training, there's no reason to think that you would be exempt from overtime. And in California, overtime happens after 8 hours. So if you've been classifying people wrongly, the liability in California.
We're not here to talk about that. We're not talking about that.
I love it. I love it.
And again, you guys, I want to reiterate, because I don't want to get sued. This is not legal advice. That none of this is anything other than a couple of opinions of individuals out here who saw public information and decided to talk about it in this sense. So, Matt, everybody knows how to find you. I appreciate you joining me, man. And yeah, exactly. Thank you, Lauren Began. Lauren Began's my other.
Oh, we need Lauren,
who always says never legal advice ever. Oh, I love it. But hey, you guys, I am going to be taking a rare day off tomorrow. I am traveling back home to my sister's wedding. I will not be going live tomorrow. I will be live on Friday, but I wanted to get back home early and spend some time with some family tomorrow. So we're taking an earlier flight. I won't be live tomorrow, but I'll be back on Friday, because you know what? That's what I'm going to do here. But that's going to be it for today. As always, you guys, if you guys got value in what you heard, subscribe to the show, you guys. Get it out there. Share it out there to your network, because that's how we are number one in the industry, is because of each and every one of you. And the fact that if you see value, your network's going to see value as well. I appreciate you guys. I love you guys, and we'll be talking to you soon.